here we go. This project, I have done some preliminary work, and as you know, you have this pattern. As you know, I need a little room to work. So what we have here is our pattern, and it's taped in the place that it is on the block. And then what I did was I cut all around the outside of the places to work, and that will allow me to jump ahead and work with you on creating the dragon. In the past, or in the beginning I should say, I started here and I put my pattern on, and then I traced it with my metal stylus, and then I went back around, and in the indentations in the wood I outlined it as you've seen in the past. So now really it's just that. Having done that, and then cut all around the sides, and I did this cutting with a rotary tool and a cutting bit, and just brought it down. I'm really just in the mood really to just get it down to a point where we can just start working. So that's all that is. All right, so let's get to it. Using a skew chisel, what I'd like to do is start to define the depths. So we know that try to get this in a place where it's easy to see. Now we know that by looking at the drawing and looking at the piece, they're both the same. So we see that the things that stick out to us when we're trying to define our depths are the horn, the dragon horn, because we can see it coming off above the neck, attached to the back of the skull, and we can see behind the horn not only the back of the neck but also this it's kind of like a scale and a fin both together, so we can see that in the background as well, and that gives us two levels of depth beyond the horn that really help us see that the horn's on top and these two items are behind. That said, we also see these scales here, which are also kind of like a mohawk, and they are on the top of the head, and we assume from looking at it in our mind's eye that they're on the top of the head, in the middle of the head. So we know that we can see these beyond the head. So these will be in essence behind. We also see the neck down here, and these scaly fins, I'll just call them fins, these fins coming off of the jawline and behind where our ears would be, behind this horn. So this dictates that it would be on the jawline, and the jawline is lower than the skull when we're cutting depth, and that when we cut this in, it should be lower than the skull here. Now, the thing I wanted to talk about briefly is that, as you can see in this drawing, the head is tilted. It's tilted, you know, up and to the left. That said, since it's tilted, this appears to be the highest point right here. But because it's tilted, it might also be the tip of this fin. And we'll play with that at some point later. But what we do want to do is start to work on the most obvious depths. Okay? And what I see as the most obvious depth is this horn. So I'm going to cut the horn in, starting at the top of the skull. top of the jawline as well. Now, what we want to do also here is set some depth and pull things away from our highest points. So in order to do that, we need to take off, or rather take down, these horns and these spikes on the top of the head. So we're just going to cut along that line, and we're just going to bring those down. We can bring them back because we'll be turning the head, rounding the head, dropping all areas of the head downward toward our depth that we bring these to. Alright, so now we have some depth on the scales above. Let's look at, and I need to see this for myself. At this stage we can bring, or at this spot we can bring this lower. So these scales here are going to join the jaw. So we don't want to cut pretty much in here at the moment, but we know that we can go deeper behind this horn and at the base of this horn. So we're going to get some depth in there. And we also know that we have these scales on the back of the dragon, and they are like these in that they are in the center of the back, so we know that they go further behind the neck. So let's cut those. And we'll get those deeper here. Now we can see parts of the depth that we want to achieve. So let's now take out the tongue. We know the tongue is also in the center of the face and therefore should match around these areas. So we'll take the tongue out. We're going to take it out at this line here and this line here. All right. Now we have some more depth here. Let's do a cleanup over here real quick so we can understand the depths we see. Okay, now what do we have here? We have the scales on the back cut down. We have the neck cut down. But we do need to cut more of this neck because we have these scales here, as you can see from our drawing. We have the scales here. They go up to this jawline and then the neckline as well. So we want to separate those. Yeah, we'll just cut them in. Okay, now this side. I'm leaving a little bit extra here so that it doesn't start to fray. It will fray anyway, but I can always remove wood later. But if I get too close right now, it will definitely start to fray at some point. Now what are we looking at? Now we're looking at this section here, and we can bring this cut up all the way to the jawline, because it will eventually, it will appear to go onto the other side. So cut this in here. And then we can cut this section, which is actually the neck, or rather maybe the jowls underneath the chin. Okay, and we're going to leave that put for now. What we want to do now is bring this neck region down. So it's very minor, but right here we have another scale. But it's on the other side of the neck. So we'll just bring everything down together, because these scales here will be even further away than the neck, than the entire neck area, larger part of the neck area. So by bringing it down, it won't damage any of the wood we need for these scales on the other side. So let's cut those. Right now I'm using a Schaaf number 7, and pardon me, yeah, it's a number 7, but it's also a fishtail. It's a gouge, as you know, it's 6 millimeters, and it's really just a cutting device at this moment. It's not doing anything super special. It's getting into this little rounded section that I have right here and here, without damaging any of the other wood around it. And so it's really just the 6 millimeter gouge that I'm looking to use at the moment. So you see that it already flaked away a bit, but it's okay because we didn't cut any further on that one. I'm going to cut some deeper depths right at the tips of these spikes so that there's room for wood to be cut away. See if we can get our fishtails in here to give us a little more help. Alright, so now we have a separation of the upper, the rear, the front, and then also the face. Alright, so we can certainly go back in here at any time and constantly, if you like, to bring the depth of this down again and again and again. Clean it up, do whatever you like. That will be worked with. Now let me have a look at it. Okay, so we know that from looking at the work, and your mind knows it too by just seeing it, that this section here above the eye, leading to the top of the head, is really just the middle of his forehead, because that's all we can see, right? Just like when you look at the horizon on a boat, it goes off and falls down in a way. This is the exact same thing. It's really just the center of the head that you can see, and so it moves. Rather, it moves in this direction. And so we need to make a cut here to exemplify that turn. So I'm just going to do a quick cut with the departing tool. And this is a shaft number 12, 6mm. And I'm really just going to cut it above this ridge right here. What that helps us to recognize is that by making this cut here, we know now that from here forward, we can cut the top of the head. And we'll do that now. Okay. Yep. So you can see that it does help us a bit, but it doesn't let us go very far because we see here that we need to bring this down further. So it's constant effort really at bringing things down that you're not ready to work on yet, and working on things that you now have room to work on. Thank you, Christian. Now, a lot of people ask me why I don't just, determine a certain depth here, cut it all off to begin with. And a lot of those guys are expert woodsmen, or rather woodcrafter, and they just, they do bandsaw work and other highly skilled jobs or highly skilled professions, and they just want to get to the certain depth that they know is correct, and then move from there. And if there's any carving to do, then do it after all the perfect depths have been set. But carving is a little bit different, and who knows, there might be some absolute masterful artisans out there that are just going straight to the depth they want, and then they go from there. But for me, I kind of really love the carving part of it, and I've never just gone for a depth that I know to be correct. And in the beginning, I did try to do a few of those things. I mean, when I was like starting out many years ago, and I found out in a lot of cases, what's that military term? It's no plan survives the encounter with the enemy. It's the same thing here, because quite honestly, if you cut it off before you think you need to, chances are you're going to need the wood you cut off. So I like to carve it off as I need to carve it off. So we're going to cut above the eye again here and around this section a little more. What do we get there? A little more. Okay. So let's look at our drawing for in front of that area, we have not giving you the best. There we go. All right, so we have here this section of our drawing. So these horns on the tip of the nose are represented here, and just below that appears to be the nostril and behind the nostril. So let's go ahead and just round that instead of cutting in any holes or anything like that. Okay, so now we've rounded that. Now we want to look at how we go about moving this head. So this head has an obvious tilt up and to the left, and we want to bring that shape into play. Now, if you look at the jawline, okay, so we understand that this is the snout, and this is the skull, and this is the horn, and the tip of the horn. So there's a pattern that flows all the way through there, and it appears that he's looking to his left, and we have this, this tapered snout. We have the high part of the skull and tapered down to the snout. And then after the high part of the stone, we have another tapered down the horn. So that makes this the highest point. So let me draw that in where I can see it. All right, so we have this section kind of like moving up, and then we have it coming to its peak, and then we have it going down again in this flow. You see that? And since we have that flow, we have to try to represent that in the carving. Now, my first thought when I try to think of doing that is that these teeth are in the way. But I don't really know how deep I want these teeth to go. So I'm just going to leave it here and carve them with the movement of that head. Trying to get this, love to put this in a place that you can see it. I gotta see it too. All right, so let's see. Let me see that. Tongue is in my way. Just cutting that back a bit. All right, let's put a little more depth into it so I can see a little more. We'll put the underside of the jaw in there. Okay, it certainly helps me see it. it will help me to see it if I round this neck in now. You know, I'm so often surprised at these tools that I'm using. When I first started out, I was using, you know, really expensive tools. I mean, certainly I got the first starter set, and that was probably from Mom or maybe my sister, somebody that knew I was interested in it and wanted me to try it out. And so I got that cheapy set from wherever, no name brand cheapy set. And then I decided that I wanted full-size chisels, and so I got those from a well-known brand. And they were so expensive. And I was kind of like worried after I bought them. Well, I know I love this, but you know, it's a pretty extravagant cost. And when you're first starting out in life, you know, most of us don't have any money. So it was an exceptional buy for me. And now I'm using these chisels, which are the Schaaf Chisels, and their quality is at least as good as those super expensive ones I bought many years ago at a third of the cost. And it's shocking to me that we're able to do that. We're able to achieve a super well-known brand. See how I'm rounding the chin here? This section here is going to let my mind's eye see how I want it to turn. And I'll try to explain that as best I can. This is literally going to have to turn like that. So I'm going to have to drop anywhere from around our high point, which is around here somewhere, pretty much on a line down. This is all going down, so I have to see it in order to move it. But yeah, so these chisels, they're very well priced, and they're really good quality. And so I'm just kind of shocked that we can buy in North America such a good tool for such an inexpensive price. All right, so I'm going to try to, yes, okay, so this is why I knew that these teeth had to come way down. So now we're going to make a good effort at rounding this whole thing. And see, the reason I didn't just hack this off earlier and start working on it is because I didn't know what I was going to need, number one, and two, as you cut this, things are going to change. Let me try to show you what I mean by that. All your drawings are going to go away, and they're going to have to be redrawn. And once they're gone, your understanding of what you need to do is limited until you redraw it. And we all hate redrawing, so uh-oh, I hit a knot. I'm gonna carefully get that off of there. All right, let's look at this again. This knot. I hate this knot. You got to take that knot off in the direction that it's going, because if you try to yank it off, it will tear the entire piece out. Got to be careful there. Okay, so I'm turning it, turning him, turn him some more here. You can see me measuring, right? From that line that's drawn, it's about right there. It's about there, right? And try to keep that in as best I can. So now you can see that we have turned at least the forward portion of the head. We also have to go this direction. We can do that when we start to form the front, because this appears to me to be a bit of a block. A blocky here, like that. It's not drawn, but our mind's eye can see that. So, or at least mine can. So now we're going to continue to round the eye off a bit, make sure that we can try to keep what it looks like in our head. And also we're going to round this horn, and it should help us too. So we see I think you can see, yeah, so you can see that right here. Maybe I should bring you a little closer. So I think maybe a little closer is better. Can you see that? I think you can. So I have to make sure you're so close. I got to make sure that I don't move out of your view. Okay, so we can see here. Yeah, you can see. So you can see here that the drawing has a bit of a square shape to it. So we have about a line here, and then it kind of curves. A line strength here and then here. And that is helping us to see where the turn is, where the turn starts for the horn. So we're going to try to follow that. It's kind of like a dot the lines. So now that we have that, I think that we can go ahead and try to round in those sections. Now, I can't really see what you can see because the camera is so low. Let me cut this in and then I'll bring you back up. See how I'm turning the chisel as I cut? Right, now I'm going to do the underside. See if you guys can still see. Okay. Bring you back up again. Okay, so now let's look at that. Yeah, that tore away. I don't want, it keeps tearing away right there, so I'm going to try to glue that back on just for kicks and giggles. We'll save that for later. Anyway, so now we've got, I think we've got this thing turning. So yeah, it's turning good. So I'm going to try to round the eye into that persona. You can see that this eye here, this section, follows that same movement forward. So we want to try to bring that into play, because you can see right now that it's not really. It's very flat. It's at the same height of the block that we started with. You can also see, let me get it before I started drawing on it all over the place. You can also see that based on the snout, the top of the snout, there's a section here, right? So we want to bring that in as well, which is why we have that cut right here, because we don't want to lose the ability to see that this needs to be done. So we're going to cut that in again. And then we're going to round it a bit just so that we can see where we want to do some cutting. Fishtail is really good for this. Okay, so now you can see we've really defaced it, but we can see also that this is following that movement. So what we'll want to do now is to round this section in to underneath the eye again. With that, we're going to use a much smaller chisel. Okay, and now that we've done that, we'll round in the top of that as well. Let's try that from here. Okay, so now you can see that the next part that's sticking out, not turning with the flow, is the part of the mouth here. So we're going to do that. And you can also see that from the lines that we drew initially to cut things, it exemplifies parts of the mouth that our minds understand is correct. So for example, here, we're at the forefront, and it's like a canine tooth. That's where your mouth starts to, turn flat when people are looking straight at you. So this whole section, which is why I drew this earlier, because we know that this section between here and here is pretty flat. So we're going to have to represent that here. But this section between here and here is also somewhat flat with a rounded edge. So these lines help us see what should be happening on your block. I'm going to cut this yet again to get a little more depth. Okay, more depth. Now let me have a look at that. Normally, I don't spend all my time in one area because everything changes how you look at the thing, so I try to jump around from place to place. I think it's a good time to move to the neck area again because we need to continually differentiate that. So it's already difficult to see this over here when you start removing all of your lines. So I need to redraw some of these. I know that this is the bottom of the mouth, so I'm going to measure down to these spikes. But even more important would be to the last spike. So that's weird. Ooh. So we know that this curves up a bit here, goes over, and curves up. This one goes up and over, and then around, and then the tongue is here. Oh, so that's helpful. We know that there's at least 3/16 of an inch or so below that line. That's why. So this got all messed up here. Okay, so this goes up and around and then over again like that. All right, so let's round this neck out. That can be helpful. And I know that this goes up. There's a bit of a curve here. Okay, so finding this all over again is half the battle. Okay, underside of the neck. Now we can cut in here again, now that we know where we are. So, I think I've explained this before, but I think it bears repeating if you need to understand this. A lot of people get a little weirded out about having cut your own pattern off. So, it's bound to happen. It's going to happen numerous times per piece. So, basically what I'm just doing is measuring with the pencil. It's basically a ruler, and the tip of my finger is a stopping point. It's really all it is. So what I did here was I cut all this off, and I really couldn't cut anything in here because I want to cut this swoop underneath the neck here and deal with all these lines, but I couldn't really touch anything until I really understood where I was. Now, all these lines were gone, so what I did was I took a line that was currently present, which is this section right here. So you got this whole section here, and I can see that, right? And I recognize that this section right here is this. So what I did was I determined that since my jawline, the bottom of the jawline, meeting up with these little spikes right here, were gone, I just went to that line here, measured the length of that line, and put it back in. See? So now I have this line back in. And then from there, I was able to determine the line underneath it, and so on and so forth. So you're going to be doing that a lot, and it's going to become second nature to you. You're not even going to think about it. You're just going to measure in and go, oh yeah, it's that thick right there. Okay, got it, cool. Or, you know, wherever you are, wherever you need to be. So I got to get that eye back in there again. I tried to show you that before earlier, but you're going to redraw that so many times that it's, you know, it's got to become second nature to you. Otherwise, the perspective will be off if you just guesstimate. And I've guesstimated in the past too, which is why I am so good at this method, because without it, it's just guesswork and nothing turns out as expected. Okay, so now that we have that line set, we can now cut here. Okay, so now that we have that, we can go ahead and put our, need another chisel. Well, get by with this, I guess. Okay, so now we have the underside of the jaw meeting up with the neck again. So let's clean this spike up. like is clean. Now let's separate it. Bring the jowl section down a bit. Clean it up again. Bring it down again. Looking at, oh, okay. So now we have this section off of the neck, and that's gonna go really close. So we're gonna round this section here. Let me sharpen this pencil real quick. So now we have want to measure distance. Correct. Okay, so that's what it looks like under there. Ah, you see, that's what we have here. That's why that didn't make sense. So we have this other thing on the other side, so it's still present. We just need to leave it in place for when we need it. So this whole section here is on the other side. It doesn't really need to be worked with at the moment, but we do need to leave it there. So what we'll do is we'll cut it out and away, or rather out and down, like this section. Oops. In my effort to get this done quickly, I just snapped it, so I'll have to put that back down. And it's easy. Piece of glue. Or a bit of glue, I should say. Yeah, it's done. I'm going to put that back on later. Okay, so now we can see the neck here. It's going underneath the neck here is going underneath these scales. So now we can round that off. Okay, so that's deeper there now. Now we can put a more pronounced roundness in here. Okay, kind of like a horse's neck. Okay, so what's next? I can see up in this section here, it's not rounded enough, so I'm going to round it a little more. I can see that it's heading away around this direction, meaning it's heading off in that direction, so I'm going to try to deal with that. Sorry, I think somebody's moving in next door. They didn't get the memo that I was going live today. Kind of like how we were working with the eye before. We were working here and recognizing that there was a kind of, I mean, it rounds up, sure, but it's kind of a flat section here that we had to get in. Well, there's also a flat section here that we kind of got to get in as well, and that's not currently present. So we're going to do that. We're going to move, what is it, this section. Okay, so let's cut that. Okay, so that's flatter now. Okay, so shape is pretty much good now. Let's see what else we can do here. So from what I can see, this section of this, wait a minute, I'm going to make sure we have all of it in there. Of this section, then we have the jawline here, and this is part of the scale, but it's quite a bit deeper back, so we're going to cut that in. And here's something to remember, or at least take note of. You see this angle that we're at here for the bottom of the jaw, and you see this piece that we're going to cut deeper. We can't just cut straight into the block and just cut it deeper. We have to follow the contour that's sitting on. So we know that this is the angle we have to cut on. So we can cut a little bit to start, which is what I did. And then we can cut a little bit on this line. And as you go down this line, you can go deeper. Because down here at this depth, it's really far away. But up here it's not. So now what we'll do is we'll take a couple shallows to bring it into play. And then we can start to slowly remove pieces of it. Oh my God, what are they doing? Building a swimming pool? Okay, cool. Okay, so now we have this extra little flap here. Now we know that the jawline, based on this photo, based on the artwork, we have the jawline here, and it goes up and over it. So we know that this piece is deeper than the jawline. So I have to cut that in. This is usually pretty detailed work, so we don't usually tackle it at this stage, but like I said, I need to see it. Okay, so now we have that separated, and we can deal with this at any time during the detail phase. Let's cut these guys in as well. Yep. These are cut into position. Okay, now by making the cut right there, now we have the eyeball. Around this section from the line that we did earlier. It doesn't look right. Okay, well, it's around this area. I'm gonna have to recheck it. We remember that being around there. Okay, so we cut this last scale in, and we know that the jawline, the jaw itself, and the underside of the jaw, which is here, is underneath that scale. So we now have to cut the jaw itself. Okay, now that we have that cut away from there, we have to put it in also over here. Okay. All right. So now let's get this part in. Yep, that's it there. And we know that this tongue is going to follow a line approximately here. Like that. So we can cut that down through the center now as well. Now that we've contoured the face and the head to match this flow that we want going this direction, I'm going to try to bring this upper jaw section and middle jaw section down to the lower jaw section and differentiate the two. Got this knot over here. It's getting smaller. now I'm going to try to put this inner flap in here as well. Okay, so by separating this upper section from the lower section, I can now try to define it even more by putting this angle on here. Now, this angle right here is difficult to see on this piece. So we need to try to fix it for ourselves. So I see this section here is rounded coming into this corner right here. Maybe it's not correct, but that's how I see it. I also see that this line is too long. Yeah, it should be about right there. So this one is, and also it's maybe some design changes are inevitable in any piece that you're working on. So I think maybe like that. Okay, we've shortened that distance by a bit. Okay, and this distance from there to there is a lot less. So to there, which means that we need to round, I think, this. Yeah, that's why it got messed up over time. Redrawing because you've removed it. So now I'm going to take that and make sure that there's a demarcation line there. Okay, so now it's actually correct. So now, still, we need to try to get this changed a bit. We have this one in, then we have this one here. And so now, at this point, we need to try to round a bit. And once we round that section, then we can draw in what we perceive as that flat section. Up here. And to make that better, we can now remove this whole section here, this whole depth section here, and flatten it. So we'll do that right now. And now to make that correct, we'll have to drop this front section as well. So we have to do at least as much as up to here. I know that you're thinking, how can you even see what's going on anymore, right? Turning it around all over the place so you guys can see is not as easy as it appears. Okay, so there's the turn. It's going to be another turn here. Let's cut these lines back in again. So we have here this section here that's just been completely removed. So we're going to drive that back in. And we know that this is still pretty correct. So now let's bring these teeth in to join again, which are going to be from here again. Alright, I need a small skewer in here. It's really just a matter of getting to this point where you've basically defined each separate piece of subject matter on your main subject, and then done your best to provide depth to that subject and to slowly shape it into the direction that it's supposed to go. Okay, so now I think what I need to do is to try to clean up this lower jawline. Let's try that. by even just rounding that a little bit, it was already helpful. Okay, so with this one here, so you can see that in this section it's really messy and ugly, but it's because they're teeth, and we will get them to look like teeth, but the problem is that they're so small that they will just break apart and just disintegrate as we're working on the rest of the piece. So by doing any real detail in here other than cutting it back, it's just not going to be very helpful. So, you know, you can just keep cutting it back if you want. This section here is kind of like a flap. It's certainly between the lower jaw and the upper jaw, but it's skin that just kind of stretches as the mouth opens and closes. So, you know, it needs to be here. It needs to be separated from every other little piece of subject matter in this area, but it's small and it just needs to be there. If we're lucky, later on when we do detail, we can put a couple creases in here to really clarify what that piece is, because your mind's eye knows what that is. All right, so now we have this done. We also need to do the lower jaw as well. So we turn the jaw here, or the front of the jaw here, and the front of the jaw here as well. All right, so I think I'm gonna stop here, and I will stay if you have questions for me. So basically, at this stage, we have achieved mostly the depth positions for this. We started with the horn, and I think from there we went to the scales on the top of the head, and then the back, went to the tongue, and then we separated the neck from these scales here. After that, we separated the lower jaw from the upper jaw and the teeth from the same place. We also cut in this contour, which is really part of the biggest challenge, and it's lower here and lower here than it is here. It's kind of like a fulcrum, except that it's really just the skull is big and thick, and everything else narrows or tapers back to front either direction. So high here, low here, low